Hey, Dr. G here. Just wanted to give you a quick message from the wilderness. My dog is growling at something, so I might have to fight a bear or something, but I'm out here at the Kaibab Plateau in Arizona. It's very close to the Grand Canyon, fairly close to the town of Williams, Arizona. It's kind of like a western town. Looks like an old Wild West town. Pretty cool. And there's a reservoir near here, the Kaibab Reservoir. That reservoir is brown, but I was just over there. The water is brown. In Arizona, a lot of our reservoirs and lakes are kind of a brown color. It's not like Idaho and Montana and Colorado where they, beautiful blue lakes. We have brown lakes in Arizona because we're kind of a dry place. But I was down by the reservoir, and there's kind of a visitor center the Forest Service has, and they have an outlook where you look over the lake and there's a mountain on the other side. And there's a placard there describing things. So I don't usually read those. When I was little, I always thought there's a hysterical marker ahead. And I never liked jokes very much. So I would always bypass the hysterical markers. And they're all over Nevada and Arizona and maybe everywhere. So I guess I do joke once in a while. So I'm looking out across the lake, the reservoir, and the mountain on the other side, and I noticed, half the trees are dead, or they look like they're dying. Some of the trees were like half brown. The pine needles were brown, and the other half were green. And then some a quarter were green, and some a quarter were brown. So, but these brown patches, it's funny, it would take a whole section of the tree would be brown instead of green. And so I'm reading this placard, and it has a picture of beetles at the bottom. So talking about the pine beetle that causes these trees to die. And the reason for that is the tree's immune system. If it gets stressed, then it can't fight off the beetles, and they kill it. So basically, these trees are going to die. And one of the common things that happens, and this happens naturally, where the beetles, the pine beetles or bark beetles, whatever they're called, this happens naturally like periods of drought, where the trees are not getting enough water, and this will happen. And it can affect a whole forest. And they talked about a big outbreak 50 years ago or something. But there's a big outbreak going on now. But the other thing is that the beetles can gain access to a weakened tree if the trees are overcrowded. So that's what this placard was saying, is now the trees are overcrowded because of mankind suppressing fires, suppressing logging, and all these different things that we do that, we think it's good, put out the fire, or we think it's good, let the trees alone, don't log them, don't cut them down. But what happens then is they get overcrowded, the beetles go to work, kill the trees, and I don't know if you've ever lit a match to a dry or dead pine needle, but it's like lighting something that's been drenched in gasoline. I mean, it just explodes with fire. So I'm thinking, if lightning hits that hillside and the wind's blowing, it's going to be major fire, and it's going to wipe out the beetles. It's going to wipe out the trees, of course, and that's nature's way, and it'll get the density of the trees down. They had some data that the density of the trees like 100 years ago, I don't know the numbers, but let's say it was 10 per acre, and now they're 1,000 per acre. So 100 times more trees per acre than there was kind of when nature was ruling things. So mankind messes things up. Overcrowding gives the beetle an entryway, and then the beetle goes to work, kills a tree, but that's nature's way. That's to thin those trees out, get rid of the trees for a while. But you can relate this to our pandemic, the COVID-19. Here, the places that got hit the hardest usually are population dense areas, like New York City is a good example, where 10 million people are living in a very small area. That, in my opinion, is breaking nature's rules. And that's the rule with a pine tree, but I believe that's also the rule with a human being. And that's why diseases are going up. We have younger people getting old people diseases, and we have old people getting diseases really commonly that old people didn't get, say, 100 years ago, like Alzheimer's. The first case, was within the last 200 years. The very first case ever of Alzheimer's disease. So it was not a prevalent disease. Now they're projecting it may become the leading cause of death. So things like Alzheimer's disease, autoimmune diseases, heart disease, diabetes, obesity. Remember, our population right now, 60% are either overweight or obese. So it's the new normal. It's normal. If you go back and look at pictures around 1900, 1800s, there was almost no obesity. It's pretty amazing how things change. So I think we can get a message from the Fremont Pines, who don't have to think about it. If we leave things to the natural way, it just happens. But what mankind does is, one, is we cram way more people than is reasonable for the amount of space. And then we communicate with light waves, like our radio waves and our microwaves and our cell phone waves and our Wi-Fi waves. All these waves affect molecules within us, like powerful effects. It's not something that's speculation. The studies are there. There's thousands of these studies that show that there's biologic effects from these waves, and it's rarely a good effect. So our big cities, the Internet of Things, 5G, I think has a potential. I'm not wishing this on me or anyone else, but it has a potential to be a disaster, which is the forest fire. The forest fire that wipes out every single Fremont pine so that nature can start over from scratch. That might happen to us. We're lucky COVID-19 was pretty mild compared to a giant forest fire, although I was in a forest fire last week at home. I got notice to evacuate, or that I might be evacuated, and right across the road was evacuated. So forest fires seem to be happening more often too. We saw Australia burn, California burn, Arizona burned about 10 years ago, the mountain by me, but it burned again here in June 2020. Okay, I'm optimistic. Nature's going to take care of it if we don't. But the COVID-19 was a wake-up call, going, hey, pull back, pull the reins back. Where are we headed? Can we learn from nature? Can we be smarter? We got this, the biggest brain per body weight of any other creature. We're the smartest creature possibly in the universe. We can figure this out. I am optimistic. See ya. This is a Fremont pine. That is a juniper.